If you hear like a humming sound in the background, that's my fan that's running. Sorry. It's kind of annoying to have to turn it off, so yeah, hopefully it's not too loud when I'm editing this. Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today I'm here to talk about some of the books that I recently have read, and by recently I really mean since I've been on my hiatus. So really for the last year and a half, just some of the books that I've been reading while I haven't been making booktube videos, because I've still been reading and I've still been collecting books. I just wasn't really sharing that on booktube. So I've divided it up into nonfiction and fiction, because I know some of you were asking about what nonfiction books I was reading, because I mentioned in my last video that I also have been reading a lot more nonfiction as well. So the first couple books that I read that were nonfiction kind of fall under the self-help, self-improvement genre. Just books that are really good at helping change or shape your mindset and just increasing, positivity and transforming your life. So the first book is called Pathway to Bliss by Joseph Campbell. And Joseph Campbell was a famous 20th century mythologist, and so he studied the mythic traditions of all world cultures and just did a lot of comparative study of mythic traditions. He's actually the guy who, I wouldn't say invented, but kind of created or coined the hero's journey, like the actual literary motif that we use today in story writing, the hero's journey. He sort of discovered that by studying all of these mythic traditions. And so Pathway to Bliss is one of his books about using myth for self-transformation. And he talks a lot about having a personal myth, a personal mythology, where you draw inspiration from the ancient heroes and ancient tales of old, and looks really into the psychological parts of these tales, and just uses that to talk about finding your bliss, finding your happiness, just initiate a positive transformation in your life. And so the book talks a lot about self-actualization, literally the hero's journey, but the journey that you go on to discover the power within yourself, to realize that you have the power to bring about change in your life and to elicit a positive transformation. It really just spoke deeply to me in all of the sort of mythic tradition and storytelling that I love. So it's a good read, and I definitely would recommend it. All right, next one is this book up here. The next nonfiction book that I had read, Atomic Habits by James Clear, and sorry if this is like super shiny in my light. They always come with these just ugly ass stickers that when you try to peel them off, they just stick to the page. So sorry if that's a little gross right there. So Atomic Habits is another interesting book. Now I have to admit, I haven't read this whole thing all the way through. I did read some of it, so I've only partially read it, so I can't give it a full review, but what I did read was very interesting. And so James Clear, he goes into just the way that you can make small little changes in your life, just changing small things, small behavioral or habitual changes, and that can have a ripple effect that can positively or negatively change your life. And so from what I read, it was very interesting. He talks a lot about the psychological aspects of habits, just how you form a habit, just sort of the thoughts that you're subconsciously processing, even when you don't realize it, about certain habits. And I thought that was really cool. They're things that would seem like common sense, and you kind of know them, but you don't really think about them. Like one example he used is cleaning your room, and I really do need to clean my room. It's getting really messy. But he talks about how when you clean your room, you do have a clean room, but it only stays clean for a little bit before it inevitably gets messy again, and you have to clean it. And he says that that's not really a good way to change a habit or to improve on something. It's more so the environment that matters, not necessarily what it is you're doing. So if you can change your environment or adapt to your environment so it's more suitable to you, you are likely to have an increase in good habits and productivity. At least that's what I got out of it from reading that, and I actually have seen a lot of people recommend this book, and I want to finish it at some point. The next book I got, I was in the bookstore a few months ago, and I saw it, and I thought, okay, I'll read this. It's an astrological book. It is Libra, which is my sign, by Gabrielle Moritz. And Libra is my birth sign. I don't know, there's like a sun, moon, whatever, but like the month I was born, my birth sign is Libra. And I saw this on the astrology shelf and decided to just look at it. I was curious, I liked the artwork. It was kind of pretty on the cover. I was flipping through and I was kind of going like, damn, this is actually kind of accurate. It really describes me. And I thought that was really interesting. So I said, okay, fine. I'm curious now. I'll buy it. I want to read this. And I know some people, they think astrology is goofy and new age and whatever. And some people really follow it and think, hey, it's legit. So this was really interesting, and I just figured it'd be helpful to learn more about myself and my emotional needs and desires and just my personality and how I sort of act and perceive things. And I felt like this was just really accurate when I was reading some of the stuff that I felt like that described me. So those were all of the like self-help books that I was reading. But the next few books are more historical texts and have to do a lot with history and mythology and all of that. So this book that I picked up was Thucydides, The History of the Peloponnesian War, the famous Greek war of the Spartans versus the Athenians. I've been wanting to learn a little bit more about Greek history and Roman history just out of curiosity. I study a lot of Viking and Norse and Northern European Germanic medieval history, but I haven't studied a lot of Mediterranean and Greek history of like classical antiquity. Again, for this one as well, like I haven't read the whole thing, and that's something that I think some people don't always understand. Depending on what the book is for, you don't necessarily have to read the whole thing cover to cover, end to end. Especially for historical sources like this, you just find, the chapter that you're looking for that has information about whatever it is you're studying, and you just read that chapter. And so you kind of use it as a reference source that you're studying with. You don't necessarily have to read it front to back. So I haven't read the whole thing yet, but what I was reading was Pericles' funeral oration, which was really interesting. It's almost like you are literally here in 430 BC, like at this funeral for fallen Athenian soldiers. It really does feel like you're at the funeral with these Greek people. So Pericles is giving sort of a eulogy, they call it an oration, where he talks and he commemorates the Athenians. He talks a lot about just the ancestors of the Athenians and the founding of their city and things like that, and just goes through this traditional eulogy, and he's following an oral tradition. It's very clear, you can see that. It's very cool because it touches a lot on just the ancient Greek, and I would say for most ancient European peoples as well, but the ancient Greek view of life and death, how these Athenian soldiers, they are remembered and immortal through memory of their great deeds in battle. But yeah, I just wanted to learn more about the Peloponnesian War, and just mostly just Greek and Roman history in general, as just supplementary study to other interests that I have, especially, like I said, with the Vikings and a lot of Northern European history. I just wanted to supplement that with some Southern European history as well. Even things that happened 2,000, 3,000 years ago, they still affect things in the modern day. A lot of people feel like, oh, well, this was thousands of years ago, it's very removed from us now. But like, when you actually study stuff, you realize these things had, rippling effects through time, and it's very cool. It's very fun to study. And Thucydides even understands this as well, because there's a quote that's actually on the back of the book. I love these Penguin Classics. I think they're really great. They're really good editions. But on the back of the book is his quote. It says, "My work is not a piece of writing designed to meet the taste of an immediate public, but was done to last forever." So you can see right there that even he has the same mindset of, immortality through memory and great deeds. So anyways, this is very interesting. Again, like I haven't read the whole thing all the way through, but I definitely want to at some point. And in the same vein of Greek and Roman history, the next book that I read is Germania by Tacitus, who was a Roman historian, and Germania is an account written by him of observations of the very warlike Germanic tribes of Central Europe, what the Romans called the barbarians. Angles, the Saxons and Goths, and just all of the Germanic tribes living in Central Europe. It's a very short account, but it goes into a lot of detail about just the lifestyle and customs and behaviors of the Germanic tribes that were living in the north in Germany and Denmark. And this is a highly useful historical source for anyone who's studying any kind of Germanic history, even like the Vikings and the Norse way up in Sweden. This book, you almost can't do any kind of study without referencing this book at some point. It is very, very useful. And what's so cool about this too is that this is actually the first account in recorded history to mention the English people, the Anglo-Saxons, as they were called. Tacitus calls them the Anglii. Like this is the first text in like written history that mentions the English and describes the Anglii and several other tribes and describes them as goddess worshippers, which is also really fascinating and really cool. They worshipped the earth goddess. And the memory of those traditions are actually still found in places in England and Germany. So that's just really awesome. The last few nonfiction texts that I was reading were the Vinland sagas, which is in my bind-up of the sagas of the Icelanders, about the Viking discovery of North America, of Leif Erikson and Eric the Red and the Greenlanders, and their discovery of what they called Vinland, which was like coastal Canada. So there's two sagas. There's the sagas of the Greenlanders, and then there's Eric the Red saga. What's so interesting about these books is about these stories is like I don't understand why the United States is so fascinated with Christopher Columbus when he never even came to North America. We should be studying the Vikings because they came here way before Columbus did and built a settlement that you can actually still visit the remains of today. So these were really cool. I'd never read them. These are very famous sagas, and I have always known about them. I knew who Leif Erikson was, but I never read the sagas. So I was really interested to pick them up. And so just kind of spontaneously one night, I just decided, hey, I'm going to read the sagas. And so I got up, grabbed this off my shelf, and just read through the saga of the Greenlanders, and then kind of skimmed Eric the Red saga. It's cool to see documented evidence of like the Norse Viking understanding of like maritime geography. You know, they may not have known that North America was the massive continent that it is. They might have just thought that it was a bunch of those archipelago, however you say that word, just all of the islands off of coastal Canada, and not like a whole massive continent, and then another continent to the south of that. So it's interesting to see almost sort of a preserved instance of what medieval people believed about lands to the west of like Scandinavia and Greenland. Okay, so that was all of the nonfiction books. So now I'm going to talk about the fiction books that I have read. So the first one is Verity by Colleen Hoover, and this is a mystery thriller. On BookTube a while ago, I saw someone recommend this, and I thought it looked really cool. And it's kind of a murder mystery thriller. It is really mind-boggling because you don't really understand what's happening until about halfway through. Very misleading. Like you think you know what's going on, and then it just throws a curveball and stuff really changes, and so then you don't know what's real and what's not. Just totally like messes with your mind-boggling. It's really interesting. But it's about a woman who's been hired to be a ghostwriter for a very famous author who has been severely injured and is not able to continue writing her book series. So she comes to live with the disabled author and her husband and work on the stories. And while she's there, she discovers a hidden diary, a hidden manuscript that mentions a lot of really screwed up and messed up stuff that this author has done. And there's also kind of a weird romance between the husband and the writer. It really messes with your mind, and you can't figure out what's really happening and what's the truth. It's kind of crazy. But it was very interesting, and I enjoyed it. And then after Verity, I picked up A Sorcery of Thorns by Margaret Rogerson. And I didn't really enjoy this book that much. Basically, it was about this girl who lives in a world where there's magical grimoires and sorcerers are kind of viewed as evil. She works in this library kind of looking after these grimoires. She gets involved with a wizard, and they get involved in some sort of political conspiracy or some sort of plot. And so they get caught in the middle of everything going on in their town. I don't remember if this is a standalone or not, but Margaret Rogerson tends to write standalone books and just has kind of a universe of its own within each book, and I didn't like it that much. I'm sorry, I wish I had better explanation of that, but it's been kind of a while. And I'm a little disappointed because I want to like some of her books. I thought that An Enchantment of Ravens was kind of interesting, but both of these books so far seem to be a little bit lackluster. They're extremely hyped, but then the story is really just not that great, or it's too short. So I don't remember if this is a series. If it is a series, maybe it gets better as it progresses, but I don't think so. I think it was just one book. So, and then after that, I read The Great Gatsby, which is one of my favorite classics. It's one of my favorite stories just of all time. I love it. I love the jazz age of the Roaring '20s. A year ago, when we were going into the new decade, and I thought, yes, this is going to be, this really awesome, fun return of the Roaring '20s. It's going to be a great new decade. And then 2020 was what it was, so that's, very disappointing. I still read this just to get excited for the new decade and read about the 20s, and The Great Gatsby is just one of my favorite stories. I just love the elaborate lengths that Gatsby goes to impress Daisy by buying this massive, lavish mansion and throwing these huge parties. I like his whole character and what he's doing. Like, what he's trying to do is win back his lover, who really is very wishy-washy and has chosen someone else instead of him, and he has to kind of come to terms with that while also struggling with feelings. It's just, there's a whole complex romance in it. Again, it's one of these books that sort of preserves a moment in time, a moment in history of an age and era that I feel like we've missed out on, which I know that kind of sounds funny because, like, yeah, it was 100 years ago, but I mean, everyone just seemed happier back then. Life seemed a little simpler. I know there was still probably lots of issues going on, as there is in every era and decade, but like it romanticizes the 20s, and I think it just portrays it as, you know, a simpler and happier time. Just something I feel like we don't know what we're missing. You know, that was an era that has passed that I wish I could have experienced, and we've missed out on it, I guess. Man, that turned really sad and depressing, but I guess that kind of goes with 2020. But regardless, The Great Gatsby is just one of my favorite works, and I love the movie with Leonardo DiCaprio, and I love the story, and it's just great. So the next few books I read are part of a series, the Last Kingdom series by Bernard Cornwell. And you guys, this series is amazing. Oh my gosh. I absolutely love it. This is a historical fiction that takes place in the Viking Age in England, and it's about the Viking invasion of England, and it is so good. Bernard Cornwell is just an amazing author, and I think he's also a historian, because in every book he writes a historical note where he talks about like what he changed, what battles actually happened that he featured in the books, and what little things he added for drama or plot, but like may not have been totally true. So you have The Last Kingdom, which is the first book and the name of the series, or well, I guess it's called The Saxon Stories, but everyone calls it The Last Kingdom because of the TV show and just the books. But anyways, The Last Kingdom is the first book. Then you have The Pale Horseman, Lords of the North, which is book 3, Sword Song, which is book 4, A Burning Land, which is book 5, and this is the UK version of the book because apparently when I ordered it on Amazon, they sent me this copy instead of the American one. And I'm not really sure which one I like better, because honestly that kind of looks cool too. So I might have to get the series in the British copies as well, because I like that. But I just ordered it and they sent this to me instead. So I actually haven't read the last 2 books yet. I've only read the first 3. I'm including them because I do intend to read them, and this is part of a series that I've been following. So I think all of the books are out now, so I can finish the series and like just binge all the way through it. And they're incredibly short too. They're only about 200 to 300 pages, so they're very easy to finish. I think I read the first 2 books literally just over a day. Like I read one day, one the next day. They're very easy to read. You can literally do it in a day. I'm just gonna hold up the first book because it's kind of annoying to hold all of them. But yeah, so The Last Kingdom and just the series in general, it follows a young blonde warrior named Uhtred, who is a Northumbrian prince. He is the Lord of Bebbanburg, which is Bamber, England today. He's raised by Vikings, but he is a Saxon by birth. He kind of rides the fence between being a Dane and being a Saxon. And so this is his story. He's basically narrating his life. He's chronicling his life and just talking about how he goes from boyhood, from being like an early teenager, to becoming a young man and being a warrior who fights sometimes with the Vikings and sometimes against the Vikings to protect his land, to protect England. Now, Uhtred is a fictional character. He's not a historical figure, although I think Bernard Cornwell did base him off of real historical figures, but his story connects with the stories of real historical people like King Alfred the Great, as well as Lady Ethelfled, who is the daughter of King Alfred, and she's also a real-life historical figure. She was the Queen of Mercia, which is one of the Saxon kingdoms, and she is renowned as a war hero. She led her men into battle against the Vikings, and the Mercians just loved her. She was just the beloved lady of the Mercians. She and her brother Edward, who later became the king, like worked together and they made battle plans to protect their land. Their stories all sort of converge, but it follows Uhtred's point of view the entire time. He's narrating the story, and it talks about how he gets his first sword, kills his first enemy, and just how he goes through life and has these adventures and these rites of passage as he roams England and goes on many different quests. It's very cool. I mean, his ultimate quest is he wants to reclaim his home of Bebbanburg, which has been usurped from him by his uncle. It's the age-old story, and so his ultimate quest is to reclaim Bebbanburg one day. But in order to do that, there's all of these other adventures that he goes on. It's so interesting. It's such a fascinating, and really it's an epic story. And it's very interesting to see the clash of cultures of the Vikings and at this point, the Christianized Anglo-Saxons. It explores a lot of how Alfred, who was a very pious, very devout Christian king, it explores a lot about how he is trying to build a united England that unites all of the Saxon kingdoms into one country of England. So it talks a lot about the founding history of just how England became an entire country. Alfred is trying to build an England within a Christian cultural framework, and how that is contrasted and how that clashes with the Danish Vikings and their ancestral, like, pagan culture. So there's like this interesting clash of the two beliefs, and it just explores how Uhtred encounters and reacts to both of them, because Uhtred is a pagan. He follows the religion or the beliefs of the Vikings and his own ancestors, but he's living in a society that's very, very Christianized, but he's sworn an oath to Alfred to protect England, so he has to kind of tolerate it and fight. And they also made a TV show about it called The Last Kingdom, and I have to say I didn't enjoy the TV show that much. The books are just better. And when is that not the case, honestly? Like, the books are always better, but in this case, the books really are better. I just don't think the show does such a faithful portrayal of the books, but the actors do a good job, and I do appreciate that. I think it definitely wants to be like Vikings 2.0. It wants to be like the Viking show, when it should just be its own story, because this story is awesome. Okay, so now we are mostly caught up. This is the last fiction book I have to mention, and it is actually my current read, and that is The Hobbit, of course, by J.R.R. Tolkien. Do I really need to say who it's by? Everyone knows. Yes, I'm reading The Hobbit currently, and I am more than halfway through it. I'm on page 163 of The Hobbit, so I'm more than halfway through, but I still have a little bit to go. But this is just one of my favorite stories, and I'm doing a read-through of the entire Tolkien Legendarium for Middle-earth March, which happens every year, and it's just a way for the Tolkien fandom to come together to celebrate the books, the movies, and Tolkien's work, and just his legacy. I'm starting with The Hobbit, and I'm going to read through the entire series of Lord of the Rings, the Silmarillion, the Tales of Middle-earth, the Unfinished Tales, just everything I can get my hands on. I'm going to read through all of it. As of right now, as of this video, it's my favorite book in the entire, saga. Maybe that'll change the more I read some of the other books that I haven't gotten to yet, but I just love the adventure in this story. This book is not as high stakes and epic as Lord of the Rings is. It's more of its own self-contained adventure, and it's very individual. It focuses on Bilbo specifically, and not tons of different characters and different battles and different things going on all at the same time. It follows Bilbo, it stays with Bilbo, and it just focuses on his character. It's a classic hero's journey tale. It's about Bilbo going on an adventure, being pushed out of his comfort zone, and taking sort of a leap of faith and doing something bold and traveling beyond the Shire. And I just really love it. It speaks a lot to me of just Bilbo sort of becoming something new. He's changing, he's growing, and he learns that he can be brave, he can be courageous and bold in his own right. Again, it's like what I was talking about earlier. It goes, see, everything in literature is connected. So it goes back to Pathway to Bliss, of just that self-actualization, learning the power within yourself. But anyways, it's such a classic, and I love it, and I've been watching the movies as I've been reading it. It's just a great introduction into Tolkien's universe and Middle-earth, and just the world that he built his stories on. Lord of the Rings really shaped fantasy as a genre as we know it. His works were just so influential, and I just really love The Hobbit. I do love Lord of the Rings. Don't get me wrong. Lord of the Rings is epic. It's fantastic. But The Hobbit, I just feel like is a more personal story for me, and I really, really enjoy it. And fun fact, too, about me reading this book was back in high school, in either 8th or 9th grade maybe, I had an assignment where I had to write a paper that compares and contrasts The Hobbit with The Odyssey by Homer, and this was really fun. It was one of my favorite assignments. It was the first time I ever had to do anything that involved a comparative literature study, and it was just really cool to go through and compare The Hobbit to The Odyssey and to Odysseus and his adventures, and match that with Bilbo's adventures. Now, Tolkien did not write The Hobbit or base it off of The Odyssey. It is actually very heavily based off of Anglo-Saxon and Norse mythology, but you can see that sort of common theme within the hero's journey and just the adventure of the hero. That was a lot of fun to be able to compare these two books and make a paper on it. And maybe I should find that paper. I would totally share that paper if I could find it. I'll have to look for that because it was really good. It was a really cool paper. But anyways, so yeah, The Hobbit is just a great story, and yeah, it's my current read. And I'm actually listening to the audiobook at the same time. Does anyone else do this where you listen to the audiobook but you also follow along with the real book as well? Because I will listen to the narration while also reading it, or sometimes I'll read the book and instead of listening to the audiobook, but I'm listening to the audiobook narrated by Andy Serkis, and it is the best thing ever. I just love his voice. He has such a great narration voice, and if you're wondering, yes, he does do the Gollum voice in Chapter 5 when Bilbo has the riddle game with Gollum. Andy Serkis is going all Gollum in the narration, and it's awesome. It makes you really feel like you're really there. You're listening to the actual story. It makes you feel like you're listening to the movie. It's so cool, and Andy Serkis does a great job, so I would highly recommend the audiobook if anyone's interested, because it's great. All right, wow, that was a ton of books. I feel like I've been talking for an hour. Oh my gosh. So those are all the books that I have read recently, basically just over the past year and past few months. Those are the books I've been reading. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. Tell me what you guys are reading. I'm always interested in hearing what other people are reading and finding recommendations. Please like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye. Here we go. Let's record. Na-na-na. Yeah, see, it does that. I don't know why it does that. Okay. There is nobody over here. So we'll start with the first book. How about that? That would be a good idea. Oh, wait. Whoa. That's right. I was about to cut the camera off. Nope, we need to make a thumbnail. But the children love the books. It's like that nun from Elf. But the children love the books. What the fuck am I saying? I can never tell, like, if I should do, when I do a thumbnail, if I should hold the books like this, where everyone can, like, see the spines, or if I should hold them like that, because if I hold them like this, everyone can just look at the thumbnail and see what I've read and then not watch the video. But if I hold them like this, it's intriguing. I don't know what I'll do. I'll try both.